This is a sine wave, and it sounds like this. Phase is a relationship in time between two waveforms. On this graph, you can see that there are two different coloured waveforms that are exactly the same. However, one of them occurs slightly later in time. When played back, we will hear the original waveform and then the second waveform slightly later. This would create a fake stereo effect. Polarity is the position of a waveform in relation to the median line. As you can see from this graph, every waveform has a positive and a negative voltage. If we were to duplicate this sine wave, but put one 180 degrees out of polarity with the other one, so flip it, we would hear nothing, as long as both waveforms were played at exactly the same note and at exactly the same time. That's the difference between phase and polarity. So in this logic project, we have one sine wave duplicated, and then we have that same sine wave with the polarity flipped. If you play two at the same time, it just gets louder. However, if we use this flipped polarity sine wave, we put it up against the first one, you can see that it's 180 degrees opposite. We will get silence. Now we need to know how this can help us with drum recording. Now if we think about it, the drum that has two microphones on it most commonly is the snare drum, and they are 180 degrees opposite each other, which means that these will have the opposite polarity. And unless we do something to fix that, we are going to be lacking in a lot of low-end frequencies that no matter how much EQ we apply, we will never get back. So checking the polarity on your close mics is really, really important, starting with the snare drum. Okay, so here we have our snare drum soloed, snare top and bottom. If we go to plugins, utility and gain on the bottom snare, and you see it says phase invert, it should say polarity, but we'll let that slip. If we engage this, you'll hear a lot more weight come back to the snare. Turn it off, and then back on. It really makes a big difference as to how our snare drum sounds. We should always check in context of the whole mix. At this point, we should check our snare drum combined, so both microphones, our snare bus, with our overhead mics, because there may be some polarity issues there. So we can do the same thing by putting our gain plugin on our snare bus. It doesn't look as though the polarity is negatively affecting our snare and overhead relationship. Next on the list would be to check the kick drum. And again, we don't need to have our polarity inverted. And our next close mics are our toms. Although we didn't need to invert the polarity on these other parts, it's vital that you check because it could make the difference between a great drum sound and a rubbish drum sound.